What's up, y'all? I'm late, I know. I was up on time and everything. I just got back in town today, coming from Atlanta, and I was there sponsored to help out with the podcast production and the recording of some episodes, as well as I was at Black Effect. But I'm saving all that for my vlog. All I'm gonna say is I wasn't at Black Effect for long, and I did have a good time this weekend. But yeah, so live stream was gonna do this last Monday, or I was actually gonna do it on Tuesday because my mama was in town. But I ended up just saying forget it and didn't even worry about it because I just felt like it was too much, and I didn't want to be trying to, I mean, I was gonna do a day later, and I just said I said I'm gonna see how the day felt, but I had some mental stuff going on, and I just didn't even worry about it. So yeah. But anyway, all right. So we are back for, like I said, it's just me today. So as you know, as they say, I won't be before you long because I really won't. I'm thinking maybe 20 minutes. Um, so let's first just jump right into it and let's recap the most recent episode, which was episode 3 of season 9, track 3, As a Man, the As a Man series, volume 2, As a Man You Build, featuring my boy Kai Saunders. And that episode was one of actually more of a recent recording. I think I only recorded that one maybe 3 weeks prior to the season starting. So compared to some of these other ones, actually the one that drops this week was recorded a week after my season wrapped for season 8. So it was recorded early January before MLK Day. And it's dropping this week's track 4. And then but I really like this episode. We just got into what happens when you building the wrong things. What happens when you're going down the wrong road, going down the wrong direction. And that clip that I got going now, we talked about reiterating, low maintenance friendships and how, like I said, I am not a high maintenance friend. If you're looking for a high maintenance friend, go ahead and cut me off. I'm never going to be that. I don't want to be that. I refuse. And a lot of these people who look for high maintenance friends in sidebar conversation because they didn't get that from their parents. So they're looking for that in their friendships. And it's just like, I'm not that. And I'm not gonna be. No one's gonna ever make me feel bad for not being a high maintenance friend. Yeah, I want too much. And I've said that before, and it was met with, oh, that person just can't give you that. If that's how you feel, cool. I can't give you that. I refuse. It's too much. But going back to the topic of building, he was a perfect person for that because we both are podcasters. We both are podcast producers. So I feel like we know how to build things. We know how to set the scene for things. And as I said in the episode, which I'm saying now, like, I can be consistent with vlogging because if I would have tried to start podcasting and vlogging at the same time, it wouldn't work. By the time I actually started vlogging, and even during this podcast journey, there are things that I picked up and dropped and picked up and dropped. And some things I don't think were necessarily like wrong time. I think they were for a season. For example, this is the public disclaimer, and I hope this goes viral. The belligerent shirts are no more. That was an error. The thing with creativity and creating, just I was talking to Jay Barnett and yesterday in Atlanta, and we were talking about he was doing his tour, talking about he when to know it was over, and he even said like you have to assess the scene and realize he was like everybody on that tour that they go on every year for the past 3 years were different phases of life. And he said if he would have kicked it up, they would have went, but he just was like it's just becoming forced. And usually when things are becoming forced. I actually left the project last Sunday because I felt like it was starting too many the butting of heads and just a lot of clashing. And then that Thursday, I got a call from something that way better. So sometimes we stay at stuff and stay with stuff too long when God is showing you is over with. And it's the belligerent thing. I think it was, as Monique would say, it's a moment. It was a moment in time. But now it's just like, it's over. And that's okay. So don't expect no, but I'm not gonna say I'm never gonna get into selling something clothes wise, but it won't be a belligerent tea. I'll tell you that. That was a moment in time. What else I want to say about that episode before we move on? So it was a great episode. I liked it. It was, of course, a lot of scripture, embedded. It was about, knowing when to do things, when, like I said, like I just said, the comments is when to move on, when you've been somewhere long enough, when you need to, you're using your skill set in the wrong time, at the wrong time. Sometimes that skill set, what you're trying to do, might be for 5 years from now, maybe not necessarily right now. Another example with my ghostwriting service, right? My daddy planted that seed in 2017. I tried to start it, then it didn't work. And really even then I had to get comfortable doing people's stuff. I had to get comfortable doing work for people, which started off as the homework and now has advanced to all these other things I'm doing. But you had to get comfortable being other people with the little things to now to where it's at. I also like how in that episode it was a lot of good quotes in there, but just about how sometimes, like I said, God will force you to sit down. And when you are building, who are you building with? And being around, having a community as well, because what happens when you are trying to build something and the people around you don't see the vision? You have to be so confident in who you are and what you were led to do that you continue anyway, because what happens when it happens? Because it will happen. What happens when you laughed at? I know somebody who was laughed at, because of how they were trying to build something, and it was made fun of by somebody they was dating, getting married to. Crazy work. But I just like the fact that we're having these types of conversations, especially on air. And something else is going viral right now. I'm not gonna make a whole video, a whole segment about it, but it's a video or just a conversation going viral about 100 men versus a gorilla. I think I'd rather hear these conversations versus these gender wars. I'd much rather hear who would win, a gorilla or 100 men versus, and it's going viral because people I seen women being like, oh, man, this is the conversation y'all talking about. Y'all don't get tired of talking about 50-50. I think this is a little more interesting, at least for right now. It didn't broke the mold on the conversations that are going viral. And it's not even like a messy conversation. It's actually a fun conversation. Of course, mess is always going to thrive, but it's just good to see a healthy, funny conversation and people giving their breakdowns as to what they think. And I'm sure it's going to be somebody's church sermon title. It's going to be used in the title or in the sermon soon, this whole scenario. So I like that. Ending off. Again, a shout out to Kai Saunders. Great episode, great foundation that he set. And then what I like again about my podcast is it's evergreen, those types of commentaries. Even if in the episode per se, we're speaking about something that happened in real time. The whole premise of the episode is, evergreen. It can be used, be discussed 4 or 5, 6, 10 years from now, and it can be an on-time word for somebody. All right. Okay, y'all. So let's get into the first topic for today. So Saquon Barkley, he was with your boy Donald Trump, and he's catching a lot of hell for it. Of course, we knew that was gonna happen. Let me share my screen and then let's unpack what didn't happen and give our take on it. The complimentaries of the Shade Room. I made it easy on myself today. So some people are really upset because I played golf and flew to the White House with the president. Maybe I just respect the office. Not a hard concept to understand. Just golf with Obama not too long ago. And look forward to finishing my round with Trump. Now you get out my mentions of all the politics and have an amazing day. And then this is the video. Okay. Let's unpack this. What does this have to do with mental health? Study of how we think, act, think, feel, behave, all that good stuff, right? So, in his defense, I feel as though he, that's his perspective. Everyone is entitled to have their view, right? Even if you don't agree. In his mind, he just feels like, I'm going golfing with the president. What's wrong with that? In my opinion, I feel like he should have expected this type of backlash. I get he just feels like, I'm just golfing. We just, I'm not necessarily, respecting you. Of course, you've seen the comments people say Penn State white wife and all that good jazz. But I know a lot of white people don't like Donald Trump either. So mental health wise, if we going based off of his decision, I feel like he should have known it was going to cause backlash. And I understand where he's coming from. I don't necessarily respect I'm just not thirsty. I'm just not a political person like that. So I'm not about to be, I'm not a status person. Like I think about my grandma. Whenever she refers to my mama's friend, who she's known this lady, I know 25 years. And she's been the mayor for the last few years. And she always be like, yeah, your mom's friend, the mayor. You didn't know this lady 25 years. And now you just, oh, yeah, the mayor. So I don't get caught up in status. I don't know if it's a generation thing. Clearly not, because we and him, I think we're about the same age, and he might be a little older. But I don't care about stuff like that. That's just me. Nelly caught hell a few weeks ago or months ago now because he did the inauguration and he said the same thing, like it's the office is the chance where my bloodline can be able to say we did it. And some people would say, well, that's not good enough because the office has been defiled and all this stuff. And it was like, well, he don't, Donald Trump don't respect you. And I just feel like, I'm just all for people going against the grain. Now, I don't necessarily mean you should do it on purpose just to rile up the masses, but I don't know. I just feel like it's not that deep. I mean, I wouldn't be going golfing with him, but I just don't think he need to be canceled for that. When I keep saying that y'all gonna cancel him for that. You're gonna cancel somebody for doing those things, but you won't cancel. No, let's talk about it. Let's go. Hold on. WWID, what would I do in this situation? Again, me personally, I wouldn't have gone golfing with Donald Trump. However, what I will say is when it comes to decision making and hanging with somebody or doing something with somebody who has a past or who is, how do I want to say this? Who is known for, a bad reputation amongst the masses, amongst people, and you're hanging out with them, right? Now, some people might say, which a phrase I actually hate, let's have a real conversation. When people say, well, they ain't do nothing to me. This is kind of the moment, it's kind of giving that a little bit like, well, Donald Trump ain't did nothing to me, and here's the president, right? So let's unpack, some people get caught up in status and will hang with terrible people because of status. And what do you do with that? What do you do with people who, to me, that's a red flag about them. So from that angle, that's how y'all looking at it, where you say Donald Trump is a bad person and this black man is hanging with a bad person. So I can't fool with you for that. Right? But he said this is the president, like, he's nice to me and he can look past some things. Now again, I will say, just because of the mass media, I do believe they are, and they have done a good job of manipulating us to not like Trump. Do I believe in everything he's saying and do? Absolutely not. Did I necessarily go out and put on a hat and say, make America great again? Did I, no. But in the same breath, I just feel like when it comes to, we can sometimes sell out for status, and that's just in general. Sometimes you might go hang with your favorite, you get opportunity to hang with your favorite rapper if he didn't beat up on somebody or beat up a woman or body slam, and don't he a deadbeat dad, but because this so and so, I got to hang out with him. So some people do sell out for status, and that's not okay to me. But let's take it to personal life. What happens when, because sometimes there'll be cases, and I'm telling you, I ain't been wrong yet. And it ain't me bragging about myself. I know this is a godly discernment, and I will always say I'll never take full credit for it. But there have been people who I'm like, stayed away from the person in the middle, from them being with that person. The difference between me and you people is, you people, I'm not going to make a scene about it. I'm just going to do it. So say, for instance, let's use prop, y'all. I like a prop. This is a bad person. Brush is a bad person, and Phone is my friend. Now, when we say what a bad person is, I'm not going, I don't put people in, oh, this is a good person, a bad person. I go off of how they move and things that they do. So say, for instance, Brush did some things that went against my personal, belief system, or, they move greasy, they move slimy, they move in a way I just can't really rock with. And Phone is my friend, and Phone is buddy with Brush. I would pull back from Phone. I will pull back from Phone because I'm like, you is some things you're not seeing about that person. Now, if I just didn't like Brush, that's different. And a lot of times I think people would misinterpret when I would call stuff out about certain people. Oh, he just don't like them. No, I'm telling you, something ain't right. And at this point, I've developed the reputation and the track record where I've been right every time. Again, it don't all come from me. But so at this point, I feel like some people should be listening, but they don't, and that's on them. But in this situation, if I wanted to hang out with somebody, we talked about status, let's talk about in general. Like, some people have a bad rap, but they really aren't bad people. So let's talk about it from both angles. What if he really isn't as bad as the media tries to paint him out to be? You know what I mean? We have to have that conversation. We just have to flip the ball. And he did this and did. There are some things that he did do, but there are a lot of things that Donald Trump did do or that he didn't do that they've they've fabricated. They have. It's some things I'm like, that's not what happened. And I speak from personal experiences when I've been in situations where people did not like me based off of things that they were told, and it was fabricated, and it was based on a scenario where you only heard one side. Because at this point, I'm not defending myself. I haven't done that really in years, but based on this angle from a person who misinterpreted something, took it and ran with it, and then it just turned to some big old thing. And because of that, people just kind of stayed away from me, which is fine. But I've been in that situation where I appreciate people who did stay around because they could have started hanging out with me because of this, and they decided not to. I think that we just have to. It's really a case by case scenario. But again, here we're gonna get both perspectives, and we use the media scenarios more so as reference points. WWJD, what would Jesus do? Well, in that situation, Jesus was the person where, by the Pharisees, hated and critiqued, and the people around him were, scrutinized because of their allegiance to him. And it's funny because they looked at Jesus like Donald Trump. They hated him. Am I saying Donald Trump is Jesus? Absolutely not. But I'm just saying can we call Jesus a public figure back then? Would Jesus be considered a public figure? I think so, huh? Can we say that? Somebody please let me know. But can we say he was a public figure? And he was a public figure back in the day, and people hated him. And, they didn't like the people that was with him either. So they were guilty by association. And if it was the same thing in today, and there was a shade room, there was a ball alert, and Jesus was on there, and you was hanging with Jesus, it would be people commenting, talking about you and how they ain't like you. Then it'd be the other half that was like, oh, go Jesus. You know what I mean? Like how they do with Trump. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. But honestly, I think that when it comes to what would Jesus do, you would judge somebody by their character and by their, versus by status, not just hang with people because of status. Terrible people with a good status, or a good person would also have status, but not as bad as they let on to be, or not as bad as the media portrays them to be. Because sometimes things that people do, not necessarily saying with Trump, I mean, we can reference him, but sometimes things they do are blown out of proportion, and they meant it like this and it came off another way. I just know what it's like to be that person that people don't know how to take. I've just been that person. That's why it's like certain things I look at with a different lens, because I'm like, it's just weird to me how, like I said before, and I'm not saying I agree with everything he do. I'm not saying that I'm over here like go Trump, but what I'll say is it just was weird to me, and it just was weird how when he got elected, everybody just hated him out of nowhere. That was just weird to me. I don't know. Finally, what should men do? If you're gonna hang out with somebody, my honest opinion, not an expert. Well, I can speak on this. No, I can't. No, I am an expert in this because I'm gonna write a book called "That's Not Your Friend." But if you're gonna hang out with somebody, you're gonna be parlaying with somebody. Don't do it just for status. Don't do it just for the views. Don't do it for clicks and likes and all that. Do it because you genuinely agree with this person, like this person. And could he have been doing that for clout? Barkley, maybe. I think he maybe genuinely felt like I'm hanging with the president. This is something to say, but my question to him would be, would you have hung out with Trump if he wasn't the president? And if so, then, then you just like him as a person. But if you're just hanging out with him just because he the president, then it kind of is like a, I don't want to say clout chase, but it is kind of like a status thing. But that's just the world we live in. People chase status and, want to have their name attached to certain people. So, I'm not gonna do that. I hang out with people based on who they are. Don't get it twisted. It is a good look. I was just at the Black Effect Podcast Festival, really literally in the pits with the stars, backstage with the stars. But I'm not gonna be thirsty because they can tell people be thirsty with a celebrity every day. Like, just be cool. They actually gonna respect you more when they're chilling like that, like they ain't nobody. So yeah. I didn't expect that, but I like that. I like that conversation. That was good. All right, and I'm by myself. I don't need help, but it would have been good to have that banter with somebody. All right, y'all. Let's move to the final conversation for the day. So, T.D. Jakes has decided to step down as pastor at the Potter's house and pass leadership to daughter and son-in-law, Touré Roberts and Sarah Jakes Roberts. Let me share my screen, and we're about to analyze this because I have a few things to say. We haven't talked about T.D. Jakes since he had got sick a few months ago now, excuse me. Let's unpack what happened.
Not afford, especially after November, to risk something happening to me and you be sheep without a shepherd. I cannot afford to let all the work of all the saints living and dead to hold this so tight, so long that I wither away. So I'm suggesting to you, I'm recommending to you that you receive Pastor Touré and Pastor Sarah. But I cannot afford, especially after no.
Today we share with the word our long-held plans of purpose for evolution for the Potter's house and our global church family. Praying for this now over the past several years has allowed us as a family and as a global church family to carefully balance the needs of our community worldwide and the peace of which we perform each step of our pain. All right, good stuff. Let's get into the first part, which is, what does this have to do with mental health? So obviously, Pastor TD has stepped down, or not Bishop, Bishop TD Jakes has stepped down. And mental health wise, I think that he's always been a businessman for sure, right? Not saying Jesus didn't come first for him, but I think it was I don't want to say this respectfully, because like I said, we got enough people attacking people. I ain't got to attack you. I just gonna keep it a thou wow without doing that. Sometimes what looks like the worst case or the worst scenario can actually be a blessing in disguise. And I think, and as it said, I do believe, I mean, he was getting older. I do believe they were talking about this for years. I don't believe he made that up. And it was like, what's the perfect time? Now I didn't have a health scare. I didn't have all these allegations come out about me. My mental health is important. I'm older. I don't have that much time left. I got more days behind me than in front of me. So it's like, because even if he hypothetically lived another 30 years, that's still less than the years he done lived. So it's like, let me go ahead and step down because perfect time, and my mental health is a lot. It's already running all them businesses, and then being a full-time pastor is a lot. Then all these allegations and the YouTube videos and the scandal, like, that's stressful. So, mental health wise, I think that he made the right choice in doing that and saying, you know what, I have to delegate because this has become too much. And when it comes to mental health and delegation, again, using it as a point of reference, what happens when, things are clashing? Like I said, sometimes everything is aligned, right? Sometimes we talk about building, this week we talked about building purpose and platforms and all this stuff, and podcasts and all that. But what happens when it gets too much, where sometimes God will allow a catastrophe to sit you down for say, okay, it's time to redo this stuff. It's time to shift. It's time to use this as a point to pivot. And what happens when it happens with us in real life? You know what I'm saying? I use me as an example with that project I was working on since around November-ish, and I could have kept working with these people, but it just was too much it was a lot of clashing. And for me, I just got to the point where I say, yeah, I think that I think we can just end this and end it and bow out gracefully. You know, months ago when we talked about this, I compared him to Bishop Eddie Long. Bishop Eddie Long, you know, was very bold and they lying on me and da da da. And also, he didn't stop pastoring. He died still being a lead pastor. So, you know, I think he was a lot younger than Jake around that time too. But I mean, he died still going strong, and you know those allegations came out, and people was on CNN and everything else. So, you know, as I said before, when it comes to allegation, we got to get both sides of the ball. If you did it, tell people you did it, own up to it, and you know, seek and just ask for grace. If you didn't do it, no matter how hard they go, it's gonna eventually fall. I don't care what the accusation is. No matter how hard people are going, it's gonna fall off eventually. You know, it's still gonna be people that believe it, but if it didn't do it, you ain't got nothing to worry about. It's annoying, it's stressful, it's sad, it's all that. I've been there, trust me. But you know, so I think he made the right decision to do it now, and that can take some pressure off him in this moment, just because it's a lot. Even without the allegations, that's still a lot. Just because you've been doing something for 40 years, you know, don't mean you wasn't doing a lot for 40 years. What would I do in this situation? Kind of jump the gun. I feel like not really, but kind of, you know, if it was me in this situation, if I was him, I probably would do the same thing. But also, I just think about, you know, when stuff starts becoming too much and it starts feeling like a force, like it's like this is feeling forced. Like when stuff starts feeling forced, that's the sign to like go ahead and readjust what we're doing. That's usually the earthly sign. So even with one of the projects I'm working with now, which was the reason I was in Atlanta, when I tell you everything is aligned, it just flows. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel, you know, we just in perfect sync. And that's how it's supposed to be. And when it gets to the point, if it ever gets to that point where it's just like boom, 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 we might need to readjust and say, you know, I think we need to move forward, because that's been the earthly sign for me, like constant clashing. WWJD, what would Jesus do? So in this situation, would Jesus have stepped down? Yeah, I believe so. You know, what was the ethically, morally correct thing to do in a situation like this? You know, you have to know when your time is up. Jesus knew when his time was up. That's when he went to go down the cross. He could have obviously stayed around, you know, he could have, but he knew the time has come for me to bow out. The time has come for me to dip, you know, and he died. So, you know, you have to know when your time is up in a certain space. And when you start forcing it, that's when things start happening. So for him to leave like he did, I think that was good for TD Jakes. I think that whether the allegations are true or not, I think it just shows his humility. And, you know, and like I said, both sides of the ball. If he didn't do it, he ain't got nothing to worry about. Although it's annoying, but if he did, you know, it's gonna come out. So, you know, people coming out with allegations and proof and things, but you know, it's one of those things where it's just it's an unfortunate place to be in. But in the year of exposure, in the time of exposure, whether he did it or not, is other people who we know did do it with their stuff. We know they did it. And I want this to be the message to somebody where whatever you struggling with, handle it in that valley before you get to the mountain. And I say that we're handle it when don't nobody know you. Deal with whatever you need to deal with while don't nobody know you. Because you rather deal with it now than get to the point where you got all the eyes on you and you have a public fall. I was gonna cover it, but I can just cover it briefly here. Shannon Sharp. We seen what's going on with Shannon Sharp. Monique told him publicly, leave them white girls. I don't want to say well. Leave them young. We just gonna say them young girls alone. I ain't even gonna make it a race thing, but leave them young girls alone. And leave, you know, and you mock these people, and you know, I don't want to date my age, I want to date my wage. And it's like you mocked all these people when they was warning you. And I think sometimes we overlook warnings because people joking or because people laughing. So we think, oh, they ain't saying, oh, I didn't, yeah, I tend to heed warnings very well. That's just me. That's because I don't want to have no Humpty Dumpty fall either. So, which that just, easily segues into WSMD, what should men do in the situation. Like I said, y'all, it's better to bow out now than to have to be forced out. And whatever that is, whether it's a job, whether that's a relationship, sometimes it's best to just bow out. And for him to bow out like he did, I think was good for him. Like I said, for his mental health, because it's a lot to deal with. The daughter and the son-in-law was going to take over the church anyway. So it was the perfect time. Big scandal. I'm getting older. I didn't have a health scare. Let me go ahead and just dip. Yeah. So y'all let me know what y'all take on the whole situation with TD Jakes and him stepping down. And like I said, I think it was the perfect time because it was gonna happen anyways. Like, let's go ahead and do this now. So yeah. All right. This week, track 4 featuring Dr. Matt Z. We talk about neurodivergence, and a lot of us have these neurodivergence, and we just talk about feelings, and it's really intense. It's a little different, but it's really intense. And like I said, it was an episode I recorded right when my season 8 ended. Like it was almost like a week out, like I think. So to be finally dropping it is, but yeah. And I'm actually gonna go back into record, I think, because I still got dummy episodes recorded. The goal is to record 2 episodes this month, one of which being this week. So maybe 3 this month. We'll see. Like I said, I got a laundry list. So all right, y'all. That is all for tonight. Y'all have a good night. PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurt. Remember who you are. Make your mind up. Don't let it make you. And remember, as always, I love us for real.